Hey guys, welcome to a third installment of the Sketchup Basics series on Combs design. In the last two episodes, we learned 5 basic tools that are used to start making and defining basic shapes in SketchUp. In this episode, we're going to learn about how to start assembling components. Components are going to become really useful once we get into more technical drawings or plan drawings when you want to make something in SketchUp to go build later. Let's jump right in and I will show you how to use components and then use the move tool in conjunction with the components. All right, so here we are with this simple rectangle that we made in the first part of the first episode. If you don't remember, I just made these 4 lines, connected them, and it created this face. In the first episode, we also used the push-pull tool to make this a box, and we will go ahead and do that again, and I will just make this 1 inch tall. If we click O, we can orbit around and see our tool, or see what we've created. If we hit space, we can go to select, and you can see we can select faces, we can select lines, and although we've made a box here, it's still individual pieces. It's not one whole component. To turn this into a component, we can click and drag, and we have selected everything in this shape. We can right click, and right here it says Make Component. We can click on that and call this component, if I can type, component A. We will hit OK. Now, when we select this, it selects this as a whole. If we want to edit this, we can double click on the component. We get this box that hovers outside and around all of the lines and faces, and now we can select different parts of it. And if we click outside of that boundary box, we're out of that mode and we go back to selecting this box as a whole. Components are really useful when you're making a piece of furniture, for example. I'm making a miter saw station currently, and I got the height wrong on my drawing. So I had 6 vertical partitions that I needed to increase by 2 inches. Components are great because if you have a component that you've copied and pasted, when you change that one component, it changes every other component that has been copied and pasted off of it. There are times where this can be detrimental, so it's important to know this on the front end so you don't run into problems later. However, if you do find yourself needing to edit a single component, there are ways to do that, and we will show you here in a minute. Back on the computer, we will go ahead and duplicate this component. We can either right-click and use the copy and paste tools that are up here, or just like any word processor like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, on the internet, we can use the simple command C. I'll turn my caps lock off. And so we've copied this component, and we can click Command V, and now we have a copy of this component. Now it's floating around and following this crosshairs. This little crosshair is called the Move tool, and we access this by clicking M. The part that frustrated me when I started SketchUp is I would copy and paste something, and I would place it somewhere, but I couldn't figure out how to put it where I wanted it. Because we're working in a 3-dimensional space, we don't know if we're above it, if we're below it. It's really hard to tell, and you can place something where you think it's right, but then when you orbit around, you see it's in the completely wrong place. So I'm going to click and place this just out somewhere in space. We use the orbit tool. We can see it looks like it's on the same plane. It's just out there. The great thing about SketchUp is that when you have components, you can hit the M, or the Move tool, and we can click on defined points on the box as what you're selecting, and I guess you could think of it as where it's going or the destination. So if I select the bottom left corner of this box, I have now selected it and I can begin to move it. And you can see it will snap to different axes, but that's not what I want to do. I want to put it right next to this box. The way to do that with perfect precision is to come over and I can click this endpoint that's defined on this other component. And it'll put these 2 points right on top of each other. So I can click here where I've selected the endpoint in the first component, and it places our 2 components flush against each other. Now, if I want to put a foot of space between these 2, I can click M for the Move tool, select anywhere on a face in the component, click, and begin to drag. And you'll see that once again, it is dragging along the red or the X axis. Because we're clicking and dragging, we can define this length. Since we've already started moving it to the right on the red axis, all I have to do is simply enter 12. And in the bottom right, you see it says 12 in the distance, and that means we're moving this on the red axis in the direction I've already started moving 12 inches. I can hit enter, and if we use the tape measure tool, we can see that this is 1 foot or 12 inches. And the great thing is, if I have started moving this, it doesn't matter how far I've moved it already. When you define a measurement, it's going to snap to that from where you started. So I can drag it all the way over here. But if I type in 2 inches, you'll see that it puts it back over here, and that's because it was originally a foot away. We've come 2 inches closer, and if we measure this, we have a 10-inch gap. Earlier, I mentioned that when you use components, one component will define the rest if they are copied and pasted from the original component. Let me show you that. If I double-click on my first component here, I can click P for the push-pull tool, select this face, and when I start to move this one on the left, it edits both components that originate from it. We'll just say 2 inches to increase the height by 2 inches. Conversely, I can also double-click this component, and I can do the same thing. Even if it is a copy of the original component, I can edit it, and it will select every component that is from that first one that we copied, including the one it was copied from. These are linked together as a component set. We'll click out of this. Another thing is, you see when I double click on this component, it gets its own set of origins or own set of axes. So this is the origin over here on the left of the whole sketch, but when I click on this component, I see the origin of just the component only. This is great until you're in a situation where you only want to edit one component. How do we do this? Well, we can select our component. We'll go, say, this left one. We can click it, right click, and there's this feature called Make Unique. Now, all I have to do is click this, double click to select the component, hit P for my push-pull tool, and now I can define this individually. That is component basics. I'll show you an example in a later tutorial where we will actually build something useful instead of just manipulating boxes. But for now, hopefully this will give you an overview of components. And a great practice is when you're making something. Let's say it's a side of a panel and it's going to be built out of plywood. To make that panel a single component. That way it makes it easy to move that whole piece as a panel later instead of all the individual parts. Thanks for hanging out on this episode of Combs Design and our Sketchup series. I will catch you guys on the next one.